What's up, everyone? I'm Angelo Spagnolo.
And I'm Vanessa Perdomo. Thanks for joining QuickTake and our partners at The Athletic.
Today we're talking about college football. Will this upcoming season even happen? And if so, what's at stake for student athletes?
A group of student athletes from the Pac-12 wrote a letter in the Players Tribune threatening to boycott the season if their demands weren't met.
That's right, Vanessa. And those demands include health and safety regulations, more transparency, and more action on racial injustice.
And this isn't new for the NCAA. They've been highly criticized for their policies and practices for years.
But now in 2020, with a pandemic raging, student athletes may have more leverage than ever before.
To talk more about it, we're joined by Nicole Auerbach, senior writer at The Athletic for college football, Brandon Kochgooden, Bloomberg sports reporter, and former NCAA athlete and college professor and historian Victoria Jackson. Thanks so much for being here with us, guys.
Thanks for having us.
And to jump right in, Nicole, we know the players, the Pac-12, are threatening to opt out, but what's really the biggest concerns and what's really at stake here?
Well, it's a very interesting case because, it's not easy to organize, and it's very hard for college athletes with the power dynamics that are at play, with how much power and money their coaches and administrators have. It's been very rare, and you've had a case in Northwestern where players tried to unionize. You had a threatened boycott of Missouri. Both of those situations were back in 2015. This is new. This is a group of players throughout the Pac-12. They have a list of demands that vary from things related to COVID-19, health and safety precautions that they were not a part of implementing. There's aspects like medical. There's a list of demands related to, racial injustice and working groups that they want to commit to and work in communities. They are asking for 50% revenue split with the league. There's a whole lot of things that are on this list, but they're all really tied to health and safety concerns related to playing in a pandemic, the fact that they are not paid, and they understand the disparities between the administrators and coaches who make a lot of money off of their labor and them not getting it, and tying in the issues related to racial injustice and concerns about generational wealth and what they can do for athletes behind them who are missing out on making money as college athletes, and they may not go pro. So they're missing out on the earning potential that they have as college athletes. So it's a list of all of those topics. And then the question then becomes how many people are involved, and are they really going to boycott?
And from the list of the demands, what do you see potentially happening first?
There are certain demands that are very reasonable and honestly probably should have been implemented already. I don't understand, this question about, providing medical coverage 6 years after eligibility expires. That's something that should already be implemented. One of the demands has already been implemented, which is that the Pac-12 has guaranteed that if you opt out for medical reasons this year, your scholarship is secured. You will have it next year, and you will have your standing on your team. So that was something that they listed that the league had already applied. And so there's definitely concerns. There's some very reasonable things regarding, if you declare for a draft and you're not drafted, could you come back and play in college sports, right? There are basic things that sound very logical, sound like common sense, that are against the rules right now. Again, things like revenue split, that is, a bit far-fetched and isn't going to be something the Pac-12 is going to necessarily come to the table and say, yeah, we'll give you 50% of our revenue. But there are smaller pieces to this that are definitely potentially going to be able to be met, especially this idea also of a third party kind of ensuring health and safety standards related to COVID-19.
Totally. Yeah, the 50% revenue split like we see in the NBA seems highly unlikely to happen in college sports anytime soon. Brandon, so on the business side, for colleges, we know what's at stake. That's tens of millions of dollars of lost revenue if the season doesn't happen. It's ad revenue, viewing revenue. Does anyone have any sympathy for the NCAA in this scenario?
Wow. Beyond the conferences themselves, I don't think so. I mean, I think everyone's looking at this, and it's an amazing thing that this issue has coalesced to the point where I don't think the NCAA really does have support. General public perception, and certainly Victoria can speak to this, is that the NCAA is in the wrong here and on the wrong side of history.
I think this moment is really shining light on a rotten business model. The fact that these schools are so dependent on football money is why they're still trying to have a football season. And that's why the players now are more powerful than ever, because if they don't play, there's no football. And the schools collectively across the Power Five could be out as much as $4 billion. And it's about an average of 78 million a school. So this is really, I'm so proud of these athletes for taking such risks. But at the same time, as an educator in the Pac-12, I'm angry and sad that it's on the athletes to force this issue. Again, historically, it's always been athletes advocating, and then the conferences and the schools and the NCAA adopting new rules that are improving athlete benefits and then taking credit for it. And, we should have been, we're institutions of higher education. We know how to do things more optimally. And this is exposing a rotten business model. And the athletes, more power to them for speaking out. And the list that Nicole walked through is so thoughtful. It really underscores a knowledge of what this system is and a sense of what we could do to make it better.
To that point, I just wanted to jump in. I think that one thing that's been really clear about why this is happening now is because we've just spent 4 months being told how much money is at stake, right? Like the players know exactly how much money is at risk if they don't play this season. And that's something that's never happened before. People are saying the quiet parts out loud right now.
And to that point, exactly, you, in the article you wrote, Nicole, for The Athletic, you had one of the Oregon State players say, well, we finally realized what was at stake for us when you realize who's pressuring us and forcing us to go play and we're being exploited. And it's finally getting to that point where these players feel that way. Do you feel like this is one of like pushing athletes back to campus before the general population of students go back to campus? Do you feel like it's one of the biggest exploitations we've seen in the NCAA?
It's pretty stark, right? I think, you look at these situations where no regular students are back on campus yet. There was this whole news cycle earlier in the summer where it was like, can you have college football if the campuses aren't open to regular students? And then we blew by that. So right now, there's a possibility that all other fall sports could end up getting canceled, and just major college football would be happening. And again, the whole argument from the NCAA all along and in court has been that they're just like regular students, they're like regular other student athletes, and they're not employees. But if they were the only student population back, and it's because of how much money is at stake if there isn't a college football season, it becomes really hard to make that argument. So I think it's just laid bare all of the things like that Victoria was talking about the system itself and how it's built. It all comes to a head right now because of what's at stake if they don't play.
Schools are nearly as segregated today as they were when Brown versus Board, the Supreme Court decision that ruled separate but equal was against the law and actually not equal, came down in 54. And we see disproportionately Black athletes playing football and basketball, the money-making sports, so that white administrators, coaches can make lots of money. But then there's also, part of this is also that athletes in the non-revenue sports, athletes like myself, I was a track and field athlete, are disproportionately white. The schools that have country club sports and sports like lacrosse or field hockey, water polo, the school districts that have those are typically wealthier and whiter. And so we are the beneficiaries of collegiate amateurism. We are able to take advantage of these world-class educations that all athletes are promised, right? That's the trade-off, that football and basketball players should be grateful that they're getting these scholarships. But we know that the educational opportunities and outcomes are very disparate. There's a bifurcated system that's taking place. And a big part of that is the pressures put on big time athletes in football and basketball to win, and winning makes money. I like to point that these institutions are perpetuating an idea that undervalues Black lives. When we're talking about the risk that these players are taking, Nicole was pointing out that football players are the athletes who are back on campuses and testing positive for COVID. Now we've got outbreaks across the country and schools having to shut down football workouts. This is another illustration of Black lives not mattering as much, because the other quiet part that's being talked about out loud now by coaches is that this has been like a test run for the university to see if they can bring students back. Because it's not just the economics of college sports, it's the economics of these colleges that are dependent on this football season too. If this goes well with the football players, then it's hopefully going to increase the psyche of the community and get, students to come back in the fall too. Because we call this educational and amateur, we can't put football players in a bubble to protect their health and well-being. So it just again underscores, that this is pretty fraudulent what's going on, and it's taking place on campuses of higher education.
College football, NCAA, they've basically been punting the ball down the court field, waiting to see what the pro leagues are going to do. But it seems like nobody has a concrete plan yet for how football can be played safely. What's the latest? What do you think will eventually happen with NCAA football?
Yeah, I think the Marlins outbreak and the multiple outbreaks that have happened in Major League Baseball have definitely been concerning. It's the first sport, to the earlier point, that is not in a bubble and is traveling. And that's what football is trying to do. And that's what the NFL is trying to do, and college football. And I think that you're seeing a lot of concerns because, how are you ensuring on the front end that you are guarding against a potential outbreak? I think one of the major concerns with college football in particular right now is testing, the availability of getting tests and the turnaround times. The NCAA guidelines, which conferences are going to adopt, is basically within a 72-hour period. So it's very possible that you take a test, then you're out on campus engaging in whatever activities, going to class, getting food, whatever it might be. Maybe you go to a bar even though you're not supposed to because you're a college student, and that's what college students do. And you expose yourself to someone, you haven't gotten your test result back. You don't even know that you tested positive for COVID-19. So maybe that test result comes back in time to withhold you from that football game. So you're not putting, the opponent and their population at risk, but possibly you're already spreading it around your own campus, right? So there's a couple of different ways that this becomes a dangerous possibility, not just, in the individual practice and a game when you're like, okay, if you wear a face shield in your helmet, is that going to prevent droplets from getting out? It's also about the community and the fact that you're not in a bubble on a college campus, and there are people of all different health conditions. There are people of all different ages, people going to live with their families, and you're potentially impacting all of them, right? So there's a lot of people that are thinking about these factors. Even if you're looking at what a pro league is doing, you're not going to still be able to replicate the scale and the size and the impact of a college campus.
The Athletic reported about hundreds of athletes in the Pac-12 texting each other. We're seeing players speak out like never before. We're seeing movements toward player ownership and the acceptance as college labor as a labor issue for the first time. And I wonder if you guys think, and we can go to you, Victoria, first, does this have momentum? Is this a real turning point, or will the multi-billion-dollar corporations kind of tamp down revolt as they have in the past?
This is a 100-year history of people being critical and pointing out the tension at the heart of college sports and really college football, which is that it's an educational enterprise and it's also a commercial enterprise. And that tension has been broken, I think, by the pandemic and the need to try to play during a pandemic. For years, people have wondered, is it going to be a Supreme Court decision? Is it going to be Congress getting involved? Like, what is going to, bring this substantive change to college sports? And I'm sad that the schools didn't take this and own this. That's what I advocated for earlier this summer, that we could have done this work. It's making athletes do the hard work. I mean, that's what we've done. We've made the athletes do the hard work again and come up with, this incredible statement that came out of the Pac-12, a really thoughtful statement. But I think it's an opportunity for schools to see these athletes as partners in rebuilding a new model of college sports. I think spinning off is one strong option, that you spin off football and include scholarships in that compensation package, lifetime scholarships, so that athlete can get a degree at any point, even when their playing days are over. I don't think the school loses anything as far as, all of the marketing and community benefits it gets. And the athletes are going to get unionized labor rights if this happens. And that's clearly, that's power dynamic that Nicole started this whole conversation around. That will be something where a power imbalance gets somewhat restored and more equitable. So that's what I'd like to see. I am a historian, and that the history suggests that radical shift might not happen, but I'm hopeful.
So speaking out, being honest on social media, protesting, like this was something that first started when Colin Kaepernick took a knee, right? For the few college players that protested during the anthem, anything is construed as a distraction, and you don't want to be a distraction because you're a team player, but also you want, to be on the best possible terms with your coach. You want recommendations to the NFL. You want everyone to think really highly of you, and you don't want to be a problem maker. And so I think that that's where a lot of this comes from. Plus, you have the backdrop of the reform in name, image, and likeness coming up as well. So you have a lot of different pieces to the power dynamic that are about to change. That, as Victoria was saying, like, can you change more? Because you are going to have some more economic justice. You are going to be able to profit off of your name, image, and likeness. What does that mean? You're going to be able to hire agents to help you with that, right? That's something that's been banned and against NCAA rules. Can that extend into other areas?
Is it not fair to ask for a revenue share, at least for maybe this year, or maybe not 50%, but something of a revenue share, considering they're just there to play sports this year? Brandon, can you touch on that maybe?
Well, I mean, would seem fair to me. I don't think the conferences and the schools are certainly going to feel that way. But I mean, this gets to the idea that they're going to need something like this union to start arguing for these things. I mean, the NCAA has shown time and time again that they're not going to give in on this. The conferences and the schools aren't going to give in. I mean, it's going to take name, image, and likeness reform that's still been going on, still being discussed since 2014 to be finalized. And I think, what we're seeing is that the players are finally realizing that they're going to have to take matters into their own hands, as Victoria's talked about.
Is the economic behemoth of college football too big to stop, and they'll find a way to make it happen no matter what?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, I can't imagine any scenario where they have their sort of come to Jesus moment a couple weeks before the start of the season. I mean, it's just not going to happen. There's too much pressure financially on the schools themselves. And then, like I said, the surrounding communities. I don't see any way that they're going to stop this train now. We just have to hope for the best and hope they can learn from the mistakes of baseball. Football gets going, the NFL gets going. Hopefully they can pick up a few tricks there. I mean, the one thing that I find a little bit scary is that, talking to the NFL's chief medical officer, Alan Sills, I mean, the NFL is basically saying we're going to have cases, which isn't surprising. But their strategy is to isolate and, get people out as quickly as possible. It's not eradication. They know people are going to get sick. That's fine at the professional level, but at the college level, I mean, if they're following the NFL's, standard and procedures, they're basically admitting they're going to have outbreaks. Do you really think that these colleges, especially the ones outside the Power Five, are going to be able to handle it the same way the NFL is? I mean, I'm highly skeptical of that. Sport
in school is a good thing. Sport is educational. It holds incredible value for young people. It's performance art. It's got so many wonderful things for young people beyond the entertainment value going on as well. And so for Pac-12 athletes to come together in this way also is a reminder that those of us who are former athletes should have this movement back, that we need to be good allies in this moment because they've got our back too.
Absolutely. So we just want to thank you guys so much for joining us. Brandon, Nicole, Victoria, we really appreciate all your guys' time and shedding some light on this really important topic. And we're going to keep watching as it unfolds.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the time. Great combo.
Thank you.